Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, July 7th, 2020, and you have tuned into the Rebel News live stream. Now, as many of you know, usually it is Ezra Levent, our big boss man, who is sitting in this chair at this time. But you know what? Ezra was working on a project and he needed to be spelled. That project was revealed as that great new novel, book of his rather. And so here we are, Sheila and myself, David Menzies, still doing the Tuesday, Thursday thing because we just love you all so much. Don't we now, Sheila Gunn Reid?
Yeah. I actually enjoy this little hour of interaction with people I'm not related to twice a week. It's kind of fun. And I was worried. I brought it up in a staff meeting because I thought, okay, well, David and I were filling in on Tuesdays and Thursdays because Ezra needed to write the book. And, he hosts a daily show. Plus, he runs Canada's largest independent media company. Yep. Plus, he writes a book. Plus, he's a dad and he's got a life. So we agreed, of course, to fill in on Tuesdays and Thursdays when we expanded our coverage during the pandemic. And I was worried once the book went live that they would take this away from me. And I like it because I like hanging out with David and I like interacting with the people. I like the little things that are going on in the chat. I always go back and read them because I like to see the feedback from our people. And I think this is one of the most democratic ways to get feedback from the viewers is to go live and let them have their say. And it's one of the most democratic ways for people to support the work that we do because unlike the CBC, you could support us if you want or not. You can have us in your home and on your screens if you want or not. You don't get that choice with the CBC. And so if you'd like to support the work that we do here at Rebel News, you can do something called a super chat. Yeah. And you can contribute in the super chat and it'll highlight your comment or question or topic that you'd like us to discuss. It'll pin it to the top of the screen where everyone will see it. And I'll see it out of the corner of my eye. And if I don't see it, then Mr. Producer Justin will send it to me in a message and we'll read it on camera. And David and I, if we have time, and we usually make time because we sort of get off topic and off the rails a little bit sometimes, we'll comment. We'll discuss what you think we should be discussing, which I think is fun.
Absolutely. And I got to say to everybody, if I look a little distracted, that's because right beside Mr. Producer, Margaret has come back from the East Coast of Nova Scotia. New hairdo. I said, my goodness, you look like Deborah Harry, a blondie. And you know what she told me, Sheila? She brought a photo of Deborah Harry, of blondie, to the hairdresser. And that hairdresser, 2 thumbs up. Just an absolute fantastic do. Deborah Harry. I love Deborah Harry. I love Blondie's music. Union City Blue. That's one of my top 10 songs of all time. So thank you, Margaret, for bringing back that 70s, 80s vibe before the world went crazy. Speaking of which, Sheila Gunn Reid, our first topic of discussion is, it's funny how law enforcement is these days, isn't it? We go to Nathan Phillips Square and try to practice journalism, and within 90 seconds, we're told, leave, or as the semi-literate City Hall security guard said, I'll trespass you. I think she meant I'll charge you with trespassing. But hey, grammar doesn't count these days, does it now?
Right.
And meanwhile, we have a filthy tent city, and more about those cats later. I spent 13 hours on the square yesterday observing them. Camping out illegally, urinating, defecating, doing drugs, you name it. And hey, what you gonna do? Because they wrap themselves in the cloak of Afro-Indigenous rising, and the tents are arranged in a circular shape, so that means it's a sacred circle. So the testicular challenged Mayor John Tory doesn't know what to do, and we have surrendered the city square. Now, we went there, as many of our viewers know. I think our fantastic 30-minute long video of this, I think it's up to 500,000 views right now, Sheila.
Yeah.
And we said, no, we're not going to let thugs taking over the city square tell us what to do. We're not going to let security guards turn a blind eye to the thugs and tell us to scram, trying to override our constitutional rights. We are going to go down there with security. We're going to go down there with our lawyer. We are going to go down there with a copy of the Trespass Act. And by the way, Sheila, speaking of which, on Friday, these squatters and their filthy tent city, they were issued a trespass violation, 11 separate counts of the act, encompassing all the illegal activity they're doing. They were supposed to be off the square yesterday, but Sheila, I apologize to our viewers. I wasn't lawyerly enough reading the trespass notice because I thought the language said you'll be evicted if you don't leave by Monday. And hey, 72 hours notice, right? I think that's very fair of the city. 3 days to get off the square. Well, no, the word they used is may be evicted. Oh, John Tory, you are so spineless. You are such a bloody coward. And on the topic of John Tory, last night, some of these yahoos went to his personal residence. Oh boy, did the police respond en masse when they gathered outside his condo. One rule for thee, one rule for me. Welcome to the City of Toronto. But this is all a preamble to what we're doing. We had our fantastic young lawyers craft a letter to the Toronto Police Service saying, either you press charges or we're going to do so on that rare mechanism called a private prosecution. Mr. Producer, do we have some video footage of that? We do. So here we go. The squatters camp that has sprung up at Toronto City Hall on Nathan Phillips Square. It's evidently an indigenous Afro-Indigenous movement. And not only that, it is a sacred circle. The camp is, in addition to being a autonomous zone, so they're really doing Seattle one better. Well, my colleague Andrew and I, a week ago Tuesday, went to cover the camp, and we were literally roughed up. We were kicked out of the square, and when I stood my ground, the police came in and told me to beat it or I'd face a trespassing charge. Check it out.
I need you to stay back.
So this isn't probably the best time to be coming here and doing this. I understand what you're trying to do. So for today, City Hall security and their staff, they're trespassing you. Okay, so we're gonna have to escort you off the property.
Now, I don't have any resentment to the police officer who's delivering that news. He's just doing so by the powers that be, i.e. John Tory, who apparently doesn't know what to do about this camp. So maybe it's going to fester all summer long. Now, I know they have a Monday deadline to get out of Dodge, but whether John Tory will actually enforce that deadline via force, well, I have my doubts, to say the least. In any event, we're not just satisfied by the fact that we did get 5 minutes of time on the square after some negotiations with Toronto Police and the security service at City Hall. Check out this footage. Watch particularly for this bald fellow who, A, kicked one of our security bodyguards right in the face, drawing blood, and B, punched our cameraman Efren in the arm.
I swear to God, don't touch my guy. Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on.
Don't touch me again, buddy. Team out.
Well, that is absolutely unacceptable. Yes, we got our way in terms of broadcasting on Nathan Phillips Square, but there's no way we can allow this kind of thuggery, this kind of savagery to go unchecked. So we have written, via our lawyer, a letter to Toronto Police Chief Mark Saunders asking that charges be pressed. And I'm going to read some excerpts of that letter to you. On June 4th, 2020, Mr. Levent and his team of Rebel News reporters were on public property in front of Toronto City Hall at Nathan Phillips Square, where they were reporting on a protest encampment. A number of protesters proceeded to physically assault Rebel News personnel, threatening them and their property in an attempt to physically injure, intimidate, and cause damage. Footage of the explicit criminal assault can be found at this link.
Our democracy is founded upon the freedom to hold, receive, and disseminate ideas and viewpoints without restriction, and certainly without fear of retaliatory physical assaults. Rebel News personnel, both in their role as journalists and as Canadian citizens, lawfully on public property, especially the public square, are entitled to report without being physically assaulted or threatened. On behalf of our clients, we are writing to urgently request that the Toronto Police Service investigate and make every effort to identify and charge those that physically assaulted Rebel News personnel. We expect this will include reviewing the video footage provided by our office in the enclosed hyperlink, interviewing the City Hall security guards, interviewing the protesters in the tents on site, and canvassing for other witnesses, obtaining and reviewing CCTV cameras and other cell phone footage that may be on social media, and other investigative methods the police deem appropriate. The culprits remain intense on public property with the consent and protection of the Toronto City Council, Security and Police Service, notwithstanding their misconduct. We look forward to hearing from you or other members of the Toronto Police confirming that an investigation has been opened and that concrete steps are being undertaken to identify and charge the perpetrators.
So, folks, it's been... Well, Sheila, I think the letter says it all. Man, I love our young lawyers. They are so good. And I want to just say to our folks, before I get you to weigh in, this is the difference between us at Rebel News and the mainstream media, at least here in Toronto. We're told, get out of the square. You can't do it. We respond by getting security, a lawyer, and we go back and we demand that we get to exercise our constitutional rights of freedom of the press. Meanwhile, a few days after that, Desmond Cole, the black activist, failed journalist outside a courtroom in Durham region, wants to give a speech in the public square, tells the media assembled there, oh, and I wish I was there for this, turn off all your recording devices, and like so many timid sheep, they obey. You know, bah, yes, master. And the other thing I want to say of the difference between us and them, on CFRB 1010 here in Toronto on Friday, they have a weekly 15 minutes with Mayor John Tory. It's just so much on-air fellatio, if you know what I'm talking about. And one of the questions that the female guest host, I don't know her name, it doesn't matter, she's not important at all, of all the things that she could ask about the trespass notice being issued to these violent thugs, these squatters illegally occupying Nathan Phillips Square. And if I had to do 10,000 questions, this wouldn't make the list of 10,000. After Mayor Tory says the trespass notices have been sent out, she says, Mr. Mayor, is there anything the city could do to, allow the protesters to remain on the square without violating the Trespass Act? So you see, Sheila, the media supports this thuggery. They're in bed with these guys. It's despicable. Like I said, my friend, that's the difference between them and us.
Well, yeah, if they aren't actively lobbying the mayor to allow them to stay, they're complicit in the fact that they're turning a complete blind eye to all of this. If one of their journalistic colleagues in the mainstream media were assaulted, it would be a national crisis. There would be panel after panel after panel convened on the CBC to talk about it. But because it's us, nobody seems to care. This is right in the heart of Toronto. I think outside of Ottawa, Toronto probably has the largest concentration of journalists in the entire country per capita. So why aren't they down there reporting? I mean, it seems pretty newsworthy that you have this autonomous zone set up in a Canadian city and nobody seems to care, and they're beating up journalists. And I saw one eagle-eyed viewer actually sent us a photo of one of these occupiers brandishing a sword, just waving a sword around. I mean, how they have warlords. They have warlords down there, and nobody's doing a thing. And just to touch on how the policing has been so politicized, and I think not through the fault of the police officers themselves, but through their bosses and the city administration. our lawyer raises an excellent point, and that's because he's an excellent lawyer. That City Hall Square, probably outside of the courthouse, is the most surveilled place in Toronto, right? I mean, I'm sure there's CCTV everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
So they know exactly who the culprits are that assaulted our team and our security. They know exactly where they are. They're still in a tent right in front of the most surveilled building in all of Toronto. And yet nobody's gone in to get them. So you have these violent criminals. These aren't just like, white collar criminals or, one of those victimless crimes things. You got a victim, you've got a violent thug, you've got it on camera on at least 2 different angles from us, and then all the other CCTV that nobody seems to be caring about collecting. They know where the thugs are, and they're not going to get them. Why? Because we're the wrong kind of victim.
Yeah, and this isn't criticism of the police, Sheila. It is their political masters that are literally handcuffing them. And before we get to the super chats that you're going to read right now, I just want to correct you on something you said. You said that if a CBC or other mainstream media reporter was physically assaulted covering an event, there'd be a cause lab. Oh, no, Sheila. You don't have to be physically assaulted. Verbally assaulted. And this is not hypothetical. This is actual cases that have happened. There's this ongoing, stupid, juvenile, vulgar thing where people come up, especially if it's a female reporter, and they say blanker right in the you-know-where. And it's not funny. It's actually boring. But it's just a verbal, blurb lasting 3 seconds, and it comes and goes. Oh, but no. We had I believe it was a hydro worker in Toronto outside of a TFC game outside the BMO Stadium. He was actually fired for doing that. Later, the union got his job back. And also, I believe it was in St. John's, Newfoundland, another female reporter, this for the CBC. I think it was actually couched in a hate crime investigation to bring charges on him. So you don't even have to use your fist. You just have to be vulgar with your tongue. And the precious snowflakes in the mainstream media lose their you-know-what. What a joke. What a double standard. But I digress. What are our super chats for today, Sheila?
If someone said that to me in the course of my job, it's gross, but it's not the worst thing that's ever happened to me at work. Shrug it off, keep going, who cares? But they hunted that one guy down, that hydro worker down like a dog.
Oh, I know.
He's an idiot. I think he'd probably had a few drinks. That's no excuse, but I mean, it's an explanation. And they went after him and he got fired. Why? This is one time in my life I may actually agree with the union. He didn't do anything wrong in the course of his job.
Yeah.
And so who cares? Why did he have to get fired over that?
Yeah, they gave him the death penalty for jaywalking, essentially. And by the way, Sheila, hopefully it's never happened to you. I can tell you, especially when we used to do the Generation Trudeau After Dark, I have so many of those slurs hurled at me, even though I don't have the appropriate genitalia for it to make sense. We could create a highlight reel of more than a half hour long. And what is incredible to me, I mean, I get a laugh out of it, actually. It's water off a duck's back. But I just can't believe, with all these prevalent cases out there of people actually losing their jobs and getting criminally charged, that there's idiots going on camera doing this. But that's besides
it. Because it's us. They know nothing's going to happen to them because they're doing it to us. Because
that's true.
We don't care. We don't care. We're not uptight about it. It's gross, but we're not uptight about it. And certainly no cancel mob is going to go after them either because they don't care about us. They want to cancel us, not our enemies. So it's fine. Okay, we've got a bunch of super chats so far. Thank you very much, everybody, for donating in those super chats. We do have a bit of a friendly rivalry between myself and David and Ezra for the longest time. David and I held the record for the daily super chat total, and then Ezra. Because, it's true. He's the boss. He's the best at what he does. And he just wrote that book. So you guys were really showing him the love. So maybe you could just make David and I feel like we are getting a little bit close to the boss today, we'd really appreciate that.
He slaughtered us, Sheila. Like I said before, it was kind of like...
It was a bloodbath.
Yeah, it was like kind of like me and you being, Messier and Coffee on those great Oilers teams of the 80s, and we were feeling very good about, scoring 4 points on a couple of shifts. Yeah. And then Gretzky just puts his gloves on, hops over the bench, and gets a hat trick on one shift to show us how it's done. So
that's exactly
we get it. We get it.
Yeah, we did get a little too big for our britches, or at least I did, and I dragged you along. By the way, does this shirt look like one of those urine-soaked sleeping bags Ezra keeps claiming that those people are sleeping in down at Toronto City Hall? It doesn't look like this in real life, but it is like a pea color, and I apologize for hurting everybody's eyes with it.
We don't have smell-o-vision, so I'll just take your word for it.
Okay, we've got to get through these super chats. We got $5 from the Burbinski. Did you see the lockdown in Aussie? 3,000 people, 500 cops guarding them, not allowed out of their apartment, forced testing, just like we saw in China, a welding door shut. I didn't see that, but I will. I'll put it on my list of things to Google.
Wow.
MVP gives us $5 Canadian. Reading my mind says we can't let the boss beat Sheila and David. Well, he did. He did, and it's fine. He deserves it.
Hope abounds, though.
Yes. Susan Dahlberg gives us $20 Canadian, says mandatory mask wearing and true facts. Proud Boys Calgary gives us $5 Canadian, says Twitter just suspended me without saying why. Won't stop me from being a proud Western chauvinist. CCP must be destroyed. Justin at Proud Boys Calgary, I assume it's probably because you had Proud Boys Calgary in your Twitter handle, because that's a quick recipe for getting nuked over on the social medias. Peter Bass gives us $2, says still no sign of Tory's spine. Menzoid for mayor. I think Menzies is better on the outside. He's better fighting the machine from the outside, I think.
Well, one thing, my first civic duty, Sheila, would be to go to the lost and found bin at City Hall to find out if the spine is actually there for Mayor John Tory. And I think you're right about Proud Boys. I think it's the moniker killing them. Here's my suggestion, my friend. Rebrand yourself as Proud Trans. Oh, and you're untouchable.
Yep. John Turner. Why is Jonathan Yaniv still on Twitter? And my friend Justin is not. That's
unbelievable.
And I was thinking about it the other day, like they'll verify and blue check any left-wing lunatic who's ever published a blog on Medium. And yet, like, we have a difficult time getting our journalists verified. I don't know how I got verified, but I have a blue check, but Kean doesn't. I mean, and Kean's work has been featured on Fox News, but he can't get a blue check mark. I don't think you have a blue check mark, not that you use Twitter all that often, but it's funny the difference between internet conservatives and internet leftists. If you just express any sort of dislike of Trump and you blogged once about it and 10 people read it, check mark for you. You can be a widely published conservative journalist breaking stories all over the world, and good luck, because you're never getting verified.
And I just use Twitter to tweet out our story, Sheila, and that's by the mandate of the big boss man himself, probably looking out for my economic well-being, that he doesn't have to fire me for losing my mind one day at like 3 a.m. when I've had a wee too many scotches.
I've never done that, but I used to tweet a lot more than I do now, and I realized what a complete and total waste of time.
It's true.
Yeah. John Turner gives us $20, says, keep up the great work, Rebel team. You are appreciated. Cindy Mix7, regular donor, thank you very much, gives us $20 Canadian. She says victory. Marcus Starr gives us $5.49. Thoughts on the Trump speech? Are you talking about the Independence Day speech? If you got all your news from the mainstream media, you would think that it was dark and foreboding and jingoistic, I think is the right word, and it was just a regular old patriotic, hopeful speech.
Now, is this the speech he did on the Friday, July 3rd, in front of Mount Rushmore, Sheila?
Yeah.
I did see that speech in its entirety, and I thought it was masterful. I thought it was beautiful. I thought the backdrop of Mount Rushmore. And this is what I love about Donald Trump. He really does know what he's doing when it comes to the optics to get his message through.
Yeah, he's from TV.
Well, but we have statues being violated right across America by thugs who are ignorant of history. I mean, they're even destroying statues that were honoring all black regiments of soldiers who fought with honor and valor in the Second World War. And for Trump to stand in front of Mount Rushmore, because these thugs would like nothing more than to render Mount Rushmore to its natural state by wiping those faces off the mountain. For him to stand in front of that monument, defending it and saying what he said was, like I said, Sheila, it was masterful. And for the mainstream media, the New York Slimes and the Washington Compost, as Mark loves to call them, for them to pick it apart and make it something negative. The fact that President Trump is championing American exceptionalism, does that not tell you how dark and dire journalism in the United States has become, Sheila?
Well, remind me when we're off air to send you, I have a list I found on the internet of Mark Levin's names for the media and politicians. Like, it's a very long list of his little fake names, like the Washington Compost and the New York Slimes and
MSN, LSD.
Yes, exactly. It's like 200. Someone keeps adding to it. I found it online every time they hear it, and I really enjoy it. And I'll send it to you when we're off air.
Thank you.
Yeah, that image of Trump in front of Mount Rushmore is exactly the image of American exceptionalism that the people who are American and who enjoy the freedom to hate America specifically because they're American, they hate it because Mount Rushmore is that. It is symbolic of the ability of the American spirit to overcome and be more powerful than even the mountains and even nature, that they were able to carve these faces out of the rock to represent their freedom.
What you said is very profound. I once read an article. It was very fascinating. It was about the use of nature in British, American, and Canadian literature. In British literature, nature is something, it's your friend. So these famous English beautiful gardens, you work in harmony with nature and this blooms. In America, nature, throughout literature, it's about something to pound into submission, building tunnels through mountains, putting up Mount Rushmore.
I like that.
And in Canadian, the use of nature is merely surviving it, not freezing to death on the Saskatchewan prairie in winter. And there's numerous examples of that. And I think if I had to choose one, I like the American narrative of humankind and nature getting along.
Yeah, I like the idea of defeating nature as opposed to simply suffering it. Let's keep going. We've got one from Arkham Killzone, gives us $20 Canadian. Keep up the good work. Love from Australia. Thank you very much. And sorry, that was $20 Australian, it looks like. James Smith gives us $5 Canadian. Why was David the only English media reporting on Canada Day in Ottawa?
Well, first of all, it's Dominion Day. Have you been following my reports?
Thank you.
You know what? It's remarkable. It's a good observation. We did see some cameras with the mainstream media logos on it, but it was funny, Sheila. What I observed at one point is that there was a march to the embassy at one point that took away thousands of people from Parliament Hill who came back. And that seemed to be when they were shooting their B-roll shots. So the Hill looked so sparse. It was just a few dozen people, a bunch of nobodies that showed up, hardly any to brag about. But what they didn't realize is that there was a march to an embassy and then back again. And it seemed to me that was what they were filming. Now, I didn't monitor all the coverage, but again, this is one of the tricks. We've seen it in the U.S. CNN totally humiliated themselves with the Trump rallies of yesteryear when they would go to a rally and go, oh, look at this, the building is almost empty. It was 3 hours before the event. Anyone you saw there was just staff setting up. And that was an actual tweet that went out, Sheila. So again, the way the media, the way the message is massaged is you've always got to have your spidey senses tingling and see what's really happening behind the curtain.
Well, I think that's why the mainstream media is so adamant about regulating social media.
Oh, yeah.
And regulating the internet, because social media has been the way that normal people can debunk the mainstream media narrative in real time. And so they can't have that. They can't have these normal people doing the job that they refuse to do simply with their little cell phones in their hand. Like, this is the great equalizer, this thing.
Yeah.
This is, DSLR quality video footage, access to everybody in the world at any given moment. And you can go around the mainstream media, these gatekeepers of information. And that's why they want the internet regulated. That's why it's journalists who are complaining about disinformation, and they want the government to regulate it instead of saying, well, we're a credible news source. These are our sources. These are our documents. Look at them for yourself, and you be the judge of what's real and what's fake, versus the guy who just publishes stuff with no sources, no documents, no, access to information documents, whatever. They want the government to silence that other guy instead of them just doing their job accurately.
How far we've come, Sheila, because once upon a time, the mainstream media would want nothing to do with censorship. I mean, the media and censorship, that's kind of like the mongoose and the cobra. And, I remember back, 2005, 2006, when our boss, Ezra Levant, he was the publisher of the Western Standard at the time and was one of the few people in Western civilization to have the courage to publish the Danish Mohammed cartoon. And back then, there were a handful of mainstream media outlets that came to Ezra's defense. They said, look, it's not something we would print for whatever reason. Ezra and his politics, it's not our cup of tea. But the point is freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. If that magazine were going today, or if we did a video with that image on it today, I'm telling you, Sheila, there would be 0.00% of the mainstream media coming to our defense. So just in the space of about 15 years, it has changed that dramatically.
Well, I think it would even be worse than that. I think that if we did that, it would be a reason for Justin Trudeau to immediately regulate the internet.
Good point.
To regulate us away. We would be in the same way that the recent mass shooting on the East Coast was a reason to ban 1,500 guns. It would be the reason to regulate the internet and nuke us and nuke people like us, like our friends at True North and probably post-millennial too.
And he's already got the arrows in the quiver. Motion 103, M103, Sheila, that would be deemed an example of Islamophobia, and that gets the ball rolling, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and I know we have super chats to get to, and I promise we will, but I mean, Justin Trudeau has been, and you don't have to look very far, and it's not a conspiracy theory, although I'm prone to them. Justin Trudeau is moving certain people into place where he can use government funding now as the carrot to get you to do what he wants you to do, or the withholding of government funding to be the stick. If you look at who he stacked his panel to decide who qualifies for these journalistic subsidies and tax benefits, of the 5 people on the panel, 3 are liberals, and I think all 3 have somehow advocated, of those 3, each and every one have advocated for a form of censorship in one way or another. One guy was pro-blasphemy laws. Another person was happy that Justin Trudeau in 2014 refused to talk to Sun News after Ezra said some unkind things about Justin Trudeau's mom. And then another one was lobbying for Justin Trudeau to silence the bullies in 2014 in an op-ed published in the Winnipeg Free Press. And the bullies that she wanted silenced we're conservatives. And she was very clear about that. So, I mean, it's not a conspiracy theory to say that there are these upfront censorship measures that are out there, but there are these more less direct, but equally as compelling censorship measures that Justin Trudeau is doing. So there's things happening in the front and there's things happening in the background, and it's coming. And that's why we fight every little incursion into free speech as though it's the biggest battle ever, because we have to, because it just becomes a snowball that picks up snow along the way.
And you know, Sheila, I think this is why we drive Justin Trudeau crazy.
Oh, yeah.
We don't respond to threats. We double down. We lawyer up. And we certainly don't take his filthy lucre like some common prostitute walking a beat. We don't do that either. So he is incredibly frustrated about what to do with us. And we know there are these schemes about regulating the news media internet, as they call it, and please define news, because they can't. But we're going to fight. We will always fight back against censorship and the incursion of our constitutional rights, whereas the media party will roll over and just take it. As long as they get at that paycheck at the end of the day and they can ask questions at press conferences like, Mr. Prime Minister, what brand of shampoo are you using during the pandemic? Then
Yeah.
It's okay, mate. I'm fine. Sorry about you.
Yeah, or Dr. Theresa Tam, how do you get frisky with total strangers during the pandemic, which was like the press conference on Friday? I have a story coming out about that. I think probably today it'll be edited and put up. But yeah, that's really something else about just the level of journalistic curiosity that goes on in these press conferences. It's no wonder they're trying to keep you and Kian out. Okay, we should keep reading because the next question is also about the media. DurFi, sorry, I think, $20 Canadian, defund the CBC, billions for something that just about nobody in the country actually watches. That's absolutely true. It's a statistical rounding error of Canadians. I just remember some of the things they were saying about PM Harper versus how they treat their preferred candidates. Yeah, and some of those people who are saying those things about Prime Minister Harper are the ones determining who gets the government subsidies these days. So that should tell you something about the state of the media in Canada and how things are going to get even worse. And I think more conservatives, if they want to be in media, they are going to head towards the internet because that's the last sort of unregulated place. And again, the regulation will follow. Igor McJazz, I bet that's not your real name. $5 Canadian. Thanks for the fight. No, thank you for the $5. Yes. D gives us $5 Canadian. David, the same cop you were negotiating with at City Hall was at John Tory's condo last night. Coincidence? We should talk about that in a second. Let me just finish this last super chat and then we'll go to John Tory's condo crisis because that's kind of ironic and perfect. Vito Anthony D gives us $5 Canadian. Vito is also a regular donor in the super chats. Here's $5 for my adoption papers after you adopt me. Who's adopting you? Is it David or me? Because actually, I use my kids as slave labor kind of around the farm. So I'm not sure if you want to get adopted by me. Like there's lots of room to do stuff that you want to do. And there's dirt bikes. So that's, you know, if I were trying to sell you on being one of my kids, that's a good place to start. But I bet you'd have to do less physical labor with David.
Well, is Madonna still going around adopting kids, especially in Africa, or is she?
Yeah, like stray cats. She's just rounding them all up. Her and Angelina Jolie, they're just, you know, creating that United Nations of children, I guess, to deal with their white guilt, I suppose.
And I'm totally cool with being adopted by either of those ladies, just for the record. Mama.
No, this is just gross. Anyways, we should talk about City Hall. I'm trying to change the subject so fast. Like lightning speed. We should talk about John Tory. The protesters came to his house last night, his condo building, for a guy who
I love it.
Is fine with defunding the place. Look at they're climbing everything. he wants to defund the police. Oh my God, she's wearing a skirt, buddy. Careful. Yeah, he wants to defund the police, but it looks like he's, he could probably stand to beef up the police budget in front of the condo there. It's funny when these things come home to roost, and it's happening a lot quicker than it used to happen, like in Seattle, Chaz or Chop or whatever the heck they're calling it, that Occupy Redux open air flop house, whatever it was.
A place of homicide, actually, Sheila, too. Don't forget that.
Yeah, yes, that's true. Once it came to the mayor's house, bring in the street sweepers, get these people out of here. And it's the same with John Tory. He's fine with the protests as long as they're in your neighborhood. He's fine with the Occupy Redux urine-soaked sleeping bags in front of City Hall. But the second it shows up on his door, send in the 5-0 because we're going to have a problem. And, I don't like when people show up to politicians' houses like that. I think it's kind of just, they go to their place of work and catch them there or whatever. But some part of me is fine with people getting what they want to impose on everybody else.
Yeah, but Sheila, former mayor of Toronto, Rob Ford, the media actually camped out on his driveway.
And I couldn't stand that.
Yeah. So I get, because I see everybody clamoring in Toronto. Yeah, politicians are public figures, but, a man's home is his castle and he should have private time. He can't. But where were they when it was Rob Ford getting swarmed 24/7 by, these media vultures, hounding him when he was like taking his kids to school or daycare? That, the double standard is just absolutely amazing on the behalf of the media and on the behalf of John Tory. And it reminds me, it was, I'm having a brain cramp, Sheila, but it was a sports commentator when the George Floyd protests were springing up all over America, including Los Angeles, where he lived. And he was going to Twitter going, yeah, burn it down, show the man you mean business. And then when the mobs got closer to his gated community, he said, LAPD, where are you? Do something about these animals. That's what he said. These animals. So when they have a little skin in the game, wow, do they ever have a come to Jesus moment, don't they, Sheila?
Yeah, these rich white liberals are fine with them burning down Black communities.
That's right.
And damaging these, lower income Black communities, that's fine.
Yep.
But don't put your greasy mitts on my golden gates that guard my gated community.
Unbelievable.
Because then, they're happy to see the police come in and crack heads. Do you think that if those protesters in front of John Tory's condo, if they had formed some sort of circle and called it sacred, the police would have had any patience with them, or would they just have stuffed them all in a paddy wagon and drove them outside of town? Because, it's fine when it's public property and it doesn't inconvenience the politicians. But once they get even slightly inconvenienced, then the police move in. They can lock up your business because of the coronavirus and shut you down and basically destroy your entire life. And that's perfectly fine for these politicians. But the second they get even the slightest bit of inconvenience, bring in the cops.
And Sheila, let's compare apples with apples here. As I mentioned at the top of the show, on Friday, the trespass notices went out. There was 11 separate violations of the Trespass Act on Nathan Phillips Square. They were given 72 hours, which is, an abundance of time to pack up these, collapsible, filthy tents that they're in. And then Monday came, and they still didn't make good on their threat. So, John Tory now has the authoritative, wherewithal of a professional wrestling referee. But if that's the mechanism, that you get 3 days notice and you only might be evicted by force, not will, then why weren't those protesters at John Tory's condo given the same courtesy? Why?
David, why weren't you given the same courtesy? Why didn't you get 72 hours when they trespassed you? You should have said 1-800, I don't care, I'll talk to you in 3 days. But you didn't get that. They didn't give you 72 hours. So, why did the people at City Hall get 72 hours? Because they're low inconvenience for John Tory, I guess.
And we even had to have a negotiation. I mean, when the Toronto police go to the City Hall security guards to see if we can be granted 5 minutes of time on the public square. And I know the year is young. It's only half done 2020. Right now, Ezra Levant, our boss, Sheila, has the quote of 2020, which is when he told that the lead cop that after you're done talking with the City Hall security staff, you may as well give Colonel Sanders a call. He has about as much authority on this matter as they do.
Oh, God. There was a lot of gold in that interaction with the cop.
Unbelievable. But again, the double standard, the hypocrisy, just shameful. Sheila, do we have more super chats there?
We do. We have a couple more.
Okay.
We've got one from David Anderson, also regular donor, $2 Canadian. Prostitute is the correct term, David. Again, I used that in a story today. Kathleen Dubino, $20 Canadian. Love you guys. Keep up the good work. Received China virus on Sunday. I think I got mine on Sunday or Saturday too. Looks great, doesn't it?
You mean you got the virus?
No, I got the book.
Oh, thank God! Because last time you were here, I hugged you, and I just don't want to get infected. So, calm down, Dave. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you're old. You won't survive it.
How dare you?
Yes. Anyways, Kathleen says that she got the book on Sunday, and I can't wait for you to read it, Kathleen. Maybe come back and let us know what you thought of it. Mike Seguin gives us $20.99. If you ever get a chance, can Rebel News ask Pierre Poilievre if he has ever considered being the party leader? I know that there were some sort of musings that he would run for the leadership, but I think the party apparatus put a quick end to that.
Sheila, I still don't understand what happened there. And I mean, I have a lot of respect for that individual.
Me too.
I think he would have been the best of the crop of the current four that we have by far. When you see him debating, he is like a pit bull, on a pork bone. And he was going down that route. And then I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, he said, because of family commitments and what have you.
Yeah.
But, then why'd you even go down that route in the first place? And virtually everybody's got family commitments in politics. So I don't buy that. I think there's something there. I mean, I'm not trying to put up some kind of conspiracy theory balloon here, but I just think there's something we don't know that made what I thought the best candidate on paper so far drop out. And it's a shame.
Well, yeah. And I think it's because the party apparatus wants Peter MacKay. And I think they're probably willing. Yeah, exactly. But I think they were probably willing to do something that would publicly hurt Pierre Poilievre.
I've heard that.
If he had run. I've heard that. Yeah. I've heard it from some pretty credible sources. And, I think maybe that was the options that Pierre Poilievre was left with. I mean, yeah, everybody has family obligations. You have family. I have family. Andrew Scheer has 5 kids. The Trudeaus have 3 kids and a bunch of nannies they have to take care of. So, I mean, everybody's got family obligations. You just figure out how to balance it, or you don't. But that's not a reason to muse about running and then suddenly pump the brakes.
But Sheila, if this information that they allegedly have on him, unless it's criminal, I think it's bogus. I think also that the public is very forgiving. I mean, back in the 80s, Gary Hart, the Democrat who would be president, he was sunk by having an extramarital affair. I don't think that flies anymore in today's day and age. Look at Trudeau himself, groping women, putting on blackface so many times, he doesn't even know how many times he's done it, and yet he slides. Nothing sticks to him. So, like I said, Sheila, unless this was some kind of criminal act that we don't know about, I think Pierre would have, gone through no problem.
Oh, well, and we're only speculating. We have no idea really what's going on.
That's true.
But you did give two examples of left-wing politicians, Trudeau and then the Democrat. And I was going to throw Clinton into the mix. It's different. It doesn't even have to need to be true for it to hurt a conservative, because first of all, conservatives hold ourselves and our politicians to higher standards than the people on the left seem to hold theirs. I mean, like, Hillary Clinton is the most crooked old crone, one of them to ever walk the face of the earth, intimidating the rape victims of her husband. Justin Trudeau, they're forgiving 3 times with blackface and groping women, while he tells us that we need to be less racist and more feminist. I mean, so it's different when it's a conservative, because not only will you have your own party members saying, I got a tough time with that, but you also have the media bloodbath that will happen. So, like I said, it doesn't even really need to be true, whatever they were going to say or not say about him. Again,
it's sad. It's sad, though.
Pure speculation. We just spent 10 minutes on just absolute pure speculation.
Yeah.
We don't know anything. MEC gives us $1.80 Canadian. I don't see a super chat, but thank you very much. Kaylee Longhurst gives us £2. Thank you for all the work Team Rebel do. #legends. Oh, I don't know if we're legends, but thank you. Oh, Ruth McConnell gives us $20 Canadian. Ruth, I don't see a super chat, but again, that's very generous. David, we have 10 minutes left in the show.
Well, you know what? Why don't we talk about, this is a video, I'm assuming it's gone viral. It's so odious. It's so upsetting. It's those 2 white girls who went on, I guess, social media on Independence Day to say how much they to say how much they hate America. If you haven't seen it, folks, check it out.
I'm ashamed to be an American where not all folks are free. And I won't forget the enslaved who died and built this place for free. So I proudly lift up all the folks who are still oppressed today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt this ain't our land. Fuck Trump and fuck the USA.
And Sheila, if you have to make your point with profanity, it just sort of takes away from the message you're trying to convey. But I'm assuming these are, a couple of white girls. And you know what? If you're brought up in America or Canada, this is indeed a land of privilege. We have it so good in the Western world compared to so many other nations. But when I say privilege, it doesn't mean you're going to get everything handed to you. I think we have a system that if you work hard, you can pursue and attain the American dream. That used to be what American exceptionalism was all about. It used to be that a guy would see a Cadillac going down the street and going, wow, what a beautiful car. Gosh, I'm going to work so hard. One day I'll have enough money to afford a Cadillac Eldorado like that one. And now it's, why does he have that and I don't? Take it away from him and give it to me. I deserve it. So it's gone from exceptionalism to entitlement. And to see these 2 girls, sing that profane song on the 4th of July, I just, I thought I'd never see such a thing. And it's not as though they're in a drunken stupor and it's something silly they did. They want this broadcast. They want to put it out. It was on TikTok, right? Isn't that a Chinese social media? You know what? Go over to China, girls, and sing a song about the Beijing leadership and drop a few F-bombs in it, and as you're led away, say hello to the 2 Michaels as you're led into solitary confinement with a light bulb on 24/7. That's what I have to say about that, Sheila, is that they have this precious thing called freedom of expression, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and you're free to make yourself an idiot, but I don't understand what the point is. You want America to be less free? That's all I got.
Watching that video all the time, my head spins every time I see it, because I can't even articulate and sort through the things about it that make me angry. Things about it that make me angry for or on behalf of Western civilization. but then also on behalf of the United States, when they say stuff like that they built this place for free, maybe it's because these girls are well-kept urbanites or something. I don't know. But, and maybe it's because I live on the farm, like on the homestead my family cleared with their backs in their hands, that I'm never far away from this sense of the amount of work, blood and sweat and tears and life that have gone into creating what we all have now, generations before us. Yeah. And these girls have forgotten that.
And Sheila, if I may ask, what did they build? What do you want to bet they're living with their parents? They're probably going to some university, taking some bird course like gender studies. They built nothing. You know, they're not makers, they're takers. So that completely, I think, invalidates what it is they're trying to say.
These girls are not doing enough back-breaking labor if they have time to rehearse and record such a despicable song. And again, back to the point that the United States, we've built this place for free. I'm sorry, but over 600,000 Americans died in the Civil War fighting their fellow Americans for equal rights for all Americans. And so when they say that what the free society and the rights that they enjoy now came for free, she's forgetting the sacrifice of over 500,000 Americans, their bloodshed. And I mean, there's really nothing new under the sun, David. Yeah. What you see there are two girls who are completely overwhelmed by the politics of envy. And when I say there's nothing new under the sun, this sort of politics of envy, people who aren't willing to work, who feel slighted or want what others have. I mean, that's been around since Cain killed Abel. These girls aren't new or original thinkers. There's always been this sort of thing, except we used to call it sinful. Now it's rewarded as social justice.
Well, Sheila, hopefully next July 4th, next Independence Day, these two girls, instead of singing, "We built this place for free," they will embrace Mr. Producer's favorite pop song of all time and sing the Jefferson Starship song, "We built this city on rock and roll."
Is that Justin's favorite song?
That's what I heard. Oh, I've just been told it's Margaret's favorite song, which you'd think would be a Blondie song, but Justin is now walking away from his Jefferson Airplane days. But I used to remember seeing him bopping to that song in the hallways of Sun News back in the day. Correction, never, Mr. Producer is saying. But Sheila, before we run out of time, again, to acquiesce to Mr. Producer, we have some super chats, but please remember, folks, the Rebel News store, and we have some T-shirts, Justin, I believe, 1-800-I-DON'T-CARE.
Yes.
They're coming. They're not ready yet, but you saw the COVID 1984 shirts. Those are very trendy and fashionable, given our dark days of the Wuhan virus right now. And there you go. We got some, it's funny, no one ever asked me to model our merchandise, Sheila. Why is that? I love the limelight.
David, they never asked me to model either, so don't take it personally. And to my great regret, when I was in the office a couple of weeks ago, when we were getting some new headshots done, again, I'm the least photogenic person in the world. If they based on whether or not you could get a gun on the picture on your gun license, I would not have one. I look like a serial killer. Likewise with my Costco card and driver's license. Like, people clean their glasses when they look at my driver's license because it's so bad. But I regret that you and I didn't get some fun pictures together for when we host the live stream for the thumbnail. I think that would have been fun. And
that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, that gives you another impetus to come back to Toronto and Alex to get his camera out. And I was just so happy, Sheila, when I heard that I was going to be given some headshots. It wasn't a bunch of Antifa thugs punching me in the face. So, I didn't know it was photography at the time. So I was elated that day.
I've seen how they punched Efron. You'd be fine. By the way, there's that cool face covering that we have in the Rebel store, and I didn't realize we had that, but I would use one of those for quadding, and I bet a lot of people would to keep the dust out, or if you're like into motorcycling. I thought that was kind of cool. Whoever thought of that, very well done. Okay, let's get through some of these super chats before we're out of time. Vito Anthony D gives us $5 Canadian, says, do you think Trump will win? I think his re-election is more important to Canada than Trudeau. I do too, especially in the West. If we want pipelines, if we want to be able to export oil, that's going to be probably the only way for us. I think it's Trump's election to lose. I think a lot of conservatives are saying, Trump, you need to do more right now to bring law and order back to the country and make it a case of, do you want law and order and culture, American culture, American exceptionalism, or do you want mayhem and I guess Marxist destruction of society? Because that's really the choice right now. And I don't think that's being articulated well by the Trump campaign.
It's liberty or tyranny, Sheila. And I'll tell you this, as I've said before, I really and truly believe this is the most important American election since the Civil War, since 1860, 1864. That's how important it is to get Trump in the White House for another 4 years. And let's hope and pray that is the case.
Well, and I don't just think for America, but for Western civilization as a whole.
Mr. Producer just cheekily asked if that was my first election that I covered, the 1860 campaign. I'm going to be talking to you off camera. Anyway, go ahead, Sheila.
Justin's in roast mode. Okay. Julian Borges gives us $2. Spicy question: was women's suffrage for the best? Yes. I'm a woman voter, so of course I'm sort of biased when I say that. But I think the Liberals are keen to make sure that women's issues and men's issues are completely different, and I don't think they are. I care about debt to GDP ratio. I care about unemployment. I care about export markets, and I think most moms around the dinner table care about whether or not their kids are going to have a job. They don't care about this other stuff, but the media and the Liberals, they really want us to care about those sorts of things and whether or not we have a handsome leader as opposed to a competent one.
Oh, and Sheila, I don't think a lot of women know what suffrage means. Do you recall in 2016, that was the 100th anniversary of the women's suffrage movement in Canada, and I went on to Ryerson University with a clipboard going to predominantly female students asking if they would sign a petition against women's suffrage. And of course, they assumed by the word that meant women being violated or beaten up. And I filled the page. So that's on a university campus.
Probably from a lot of girls who self-identify as feminists too, by the way. Speaking of which, the famous five, if somebody went back through their current views, they'd probably get canceled into the dust by just if we run them through the lens of modern wokeness.
That's okay. I'm sticking with the Fantastic Four.
Great. We've got one more super chat and we're way over. We're past the hour. We've got one from Durfai, $10 Canadian. Prefer a patriotic immigrant who loves the country and wants to contribute to a leftist who hates the country and wants to bring in a failed ideology. You know what? I don't care where you come from, as long as you care about liberty, freedom, personal responsibility, versus any old run-of-the-mill leftist, feminist who wants to control your life.
Yeah, and it's also nice if you come into the country legally.
Yeah,
just
come
say.
in the front door. And it's 3 minutes past the hour, David.
Okay, well, listen, what an hour, Sheila. Super fast. Please, folks, as Mr. Producer is wanting to remind me, go to the Rebel News Store. Lots of great merch there. So on the behalf of Sheila Gunn Reid, Mr. Producer, Fake Deborah Harry, and myself, David Menzies, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to all those with the Super Chats. It's so greatly appreciated, especially during these dark days. In the meantime, stay safe out there, and we'll see you on Thursday. Good afternoon.